The opinions and views expressed in the following presentation do not necessarily reflect those of GameCon Radio or its affiliates.
Banshee's Lair, Visionary Talk Radio on GameConRadio.com. We rock your world. Tonight I'm over the moon because I have a great story that I didn't tell Gary, but and we're going back years and years and years ago. I'm sitting in Atlanta, Georgia. The Atlanta Army Depot was down there, and we decided we were going to go to a drive-in movie. And there we are, sitting in this drive-in movie, and right to the left of us, up on this gorgeous hill, is this cemetery. And it's got these, like, winding roads, and it was very picturesque. It was very pretty. And then all of a sudden, Night of the Living Dead came on. And before that movie was over, half of that lot was completely empty. Cars were pulling out because you didn't know whether you should watch the movie or watch the cemetery. And I swear, if anybody had come up to that car at that point, they would have been dead. Because we would have went out there and just killed them. That would have been it. That is my Night of the Living Dead story. Gary Steiner.
And a unique one, I might add.
Thank you. Yeah, Gary Streiner was one of the production crew for George Romero's movie Night of the Living Dead. And welcome to the lair, Gary.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
How did this movie come about?
Well, it came about because we were a company called The Latent Image, which consisted basically of George Romero, my brother, R Streiner, John Russo, myself, and the gentleman that went on to be known as Zombie Number One, Bill Heinzman. We had a commercial production company in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which, of course, back in the 60s was a rarity. Certainly, we didn't have the diversity in production that we have today. And, there were centers. There was New York, there was Chicago, and there was the West Coast. There was L.A., and rarely did any cities in between those cities ever have a chance. And so we were kind of unique because we were, big fish in a small pond, and we had a fairly successful commercial production company doing TV commercials and industrial films and travel logs and things like that. And actually, my brother and George, we had a TV station, the local NBC affiliate, had bought a package of horror films that they were going to run on Saturday night, at midnight, whatever. Mm-hmm. And so my brother and George were very interested in what these horror films were going to be, because horror was really not something, back in that time that you got to see much of on TV. It was not anywhere near as popular as it is today. Mm-hmm. And so they watched the first in this series of films, and they just said, we can do better than this. And there was planted the seed that night that George would start writing, a script for a horror film that we would produce sort of on our off hours, if you will. And it then got to John Russo collaborated with George, and so they co-wrote Night of the Living Dead, and then we said, okay, well, now we have a script, now what do we do? And we, amongst ourselves, the production company that actually produced Night of the Living Dead was called Image 10 Corporation. And that was 10 of us between the sort of the working members of Image 10 and, of the Late Image and our friends. We put 10 people together that all threw in $600. And that was the beginning of Night of the Living Dead. We were, with that money, able to buy the film stock that we needed. We had all the equipment because we were a production company. And that was it. We just said, we're going to go off and we're going to do this. And, probably against so many odds, it's hard to even fathom the likelihood of this ever happening. We did it. We went out and we made a film. And it was called Night of the Living Dead. And here we are 44 years later. It's being touted by, people on CBS as the most horrifying film ever made, and it's on, endless lists, number one on endless lists of horror films. I mean, it kind of started out as being, a hugely successful independent horror film. And then it transcended that, and it just went into becoming, like the number one horror film. And there's a lot of company out there, There's a guy named, Alfred Hitchcock created a few horror films in his time, and we even back then we were compared to Psycho, because Psycho was out at about that same time, and I guess in a weird way, it's hard for me to completely comprehend the impact that it's had on people. I mean, I've had literally hundreds of people tell me that Night of the Living Dead changed their life, and because they saw a reality that was not something that was prior to that in their knowledge bank, if you will, and so all of a sudden there they are, they're seeing this possibility of other things happening, and as I said, being a one of the people that was there every day on set from day one, it kind of loses its scary parts for me because, I know it was a film, but here we are, like I said, 44 years later, and it's still held in that high regard. So it's quite an honor,
Yeah, for anybody who doesn't know, and we're going to try to play this sound clip for it, your brother Russ was Johnny, and he was the brother of the girl in the cemetery. It starts out with a brother and sister carrying on the family tradition of laying flowers on the father's grave. The mother can't make it, so he's got the sister in the cemetery, and the sister is kind of creeped out, and he starts teasing her, "You're still afraid, you're still afraid," because when they were children, he used to scare her. And then he does this scene, and we're going to play the audio.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Stop it! You're ignorant.
They're coming for you, Barbara.
Stop it! You're acting like a child.
They're coming for you. Look, there comes one of them now.
He'll hear you.
Here he comes now. I'm getting out of here.
Johnny!
Okay, that has got to be one of the best openings for a movie in history. They're coming to get you, Bob.
It is. It's
very
horror
deliberate.
Legend.
Yeah, it's very deliberate. They're coming to get you, Barbara. He's even accentuating the syllables.
Yes.
And she's looking at him like, "You little goober, stop it, you little creep, And it just worked its way into magic. Something else that movie did. Go ahead.
It's kind of what brothers and sisters do, right? Although they were a little bit older for that kind of game playing, but it's the kind of, big brothers always like to scare their sisters. That's like legendary. So it fell right into that whole, sort of concept of all the sisters who just, want to smack their brothers in the head because at every opportunity they try to scare them. So, it fell clearly into that realm.
Yeah, and it did something else there. It also brought forth the heroic part of being brother and sister, where he realizes somebody's attacking his sister, and he's going to try to save her. So it goes through that whole dynamic, but it lowers your guard at first when he's doing that stupid thing. They're coming to get you, Barbara. There he is. He's coming. Because you're laughing, thinking, what a jerk that brother is. And then all of a sudden, that happens. That horror, the guy, you could see at first you can't realize it, but then you realize this guy is, something's wrong with him.
He gets a little closer.
Yeah, and he gets closer, he grabs her, and the brother goes, holy crap! Something this movie did, too, was play off of, before this movie, we had Vincent Price with Last Man Alive on Earth, or something like that, where, and that was the plague. It was a plague that came from Europe and killed everybody, turned them into vampires. But then your movie took it to a whole new thing. It's something from outer space, a comet or something. There's something causing it. And of course,
a nuclear holocaust was perceived as being, what might have caused this mutation to happen, But
and
it was never resolved.
Back then, that was a real fear.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that was like, exactly. I mean, we were right in the throes of Vietnam, and Lord only knew what kind of craziness could happen. And, there was a lot of social tension in the world back at that point in time. It played right into the hands of that. And, but yeah, you're right. I mean, Bill Heinzman, who was the person that played the cemetery zombie, or, was referred to for most of his life as zombie number one, really defined the modern zombie, and yes, as you said, we did have them, Vincent Price, and we did have them in earlier films, but they were not the same. They didn't eat entrails, and they didn't, they were not carnivores in front of your very eyes, and that was the first time that an audience had been exposed to that. So it was pretty terrifying.
It was. And one, Captain Celluloid, Terry Soto, is in our chat box, and he's helping out. And he says the music score was taken from a B-movie, Hideous Sun Demon, from 1959. So he's made use of a creepy score, too. But a lot of it was very quiet.
But just to make a correction there, it was library music. I'm not saying that it wasn't the same library music that was used, but we got the music from a Capitol, library. So none of it was scored. It was all, really fairly well crafted. George had an amazing ability to. In fact, I've said it publicly many times. I thought that George's real skill, even more than being a director, was as an editor. He was brilliant. He was amazing and able to create, that tension with, music from a library, not music scored to the particular scenes that were shot. So, and boy, that's. If there's lesson number one anywhere of the importance of music and score in a film, that was one of them. Absolutely right.
And you were one of the sound techs, and then you ended up being recruited as a zombie too, right?
Yes. Well, no, I was actually, I like to refer to myself as a badass posse member. It being all of, like, 18 years old. Yes, I was actually one of the 3 people that threw Ben on the fire at the end of the film, and you don't quite recognize me because it was all done in stills, and the stills were treated and made grainy and so on and so forth. But yeah, that was my claim to fame, and you know, I was one of the few people that, you know, I mean, I was working so much behind the camera, there weren't very many opportunities to, you know, but everybody else kind of did have the opportunity, so and it wasn't out of anything other than pure necessity. It was like, okay, we need, and they weren't called zombies in that day, they were called ghouls. You know, never in any of the script or anything or in the film are they ever referred to as zombies. Zombies was something that actually came really 2 films later, you know, when George did Dawn of the Dead, is when they really got, you know, tagged zombies, and then zombie became the, you know, that became the vernacular. But yeah, when Night of the Living Dead, they were ghouls. So yeah, so it was like, you know, everybody got to be a ghoul, you know, but unfortunately I was not only the sound man on the film, but I was an assistant cameraman. There were only 5 of us, really. That we did have more people, like on bigger days, and we did have the help of Marilyn Eastman and Carl Hardman, both, you know, not only played roles, but they also, I mean, Marilyn Eastman was Helen Cooper, Harry's wife, a starring role, but she was also a zombie, or a ghoul, I should say, correct myself, and she did makeup, you know, and so, yeah, I mean, it was all, you know, born out of necessity. There wasn't, there weren't any union lines being crossed because there were no unions, and,
right.
You know, which is, you know, I've said this a number of times. I mean, I don't think that if the only way Night of the Living Dead could have been made and been as popular as it was by being an independent film, meaning that there weren't any studios involved in the production of it. Then every situation, you have got to deal with studios eventually if you want to distribute your film, because
right.
The studios basically control the distribution of films as well as largely the production of them. And, you know, again, I've said it before, that I think with Night of the Living Dead, the expectations were, I mean, they liked the film, but I think that they were perceiving it more as a B drive-in movie, which was really truly what it was made as. That was our expectation of it, that it would be the second film, you know, on a double bill at a drive-in, and I really truly think that a lot of very significant things were overlooked because of their expectations were not as high as they might have been if it was a film that they, you know, had money in and had produced and, you know, were involved with from the beginning. For instance, you know, number one, if you have a black male lead that actually smacks a white woman, I mean, that's unheard of in a studio.
I was going to bring that up. Yeah. That
is not going to happen, okay? Or nudity at that point in time, and you know, one of the ghouls was, you know, obviously right out of the morgue, and she has a tag on her arm, and she's naked. You know, and I could go, and I mean, let's even go to the pure essence of the fact that the film was shot in black and white. These are all things that kind of went against the grain of a studio system, but somehow they all made it in, and there were, you know, Walter Reed and Continental, who was the distributors, had very little. They had a couple of scenes that they were actually right about. There was there was a scene with Helen and Harry Cooper in the basement, which is still in there, but it was shortened by probably 12 minutes. It just went on and on and on and on with them bickering. Right. Obviously an unhappy couple, which is still in the film, but they just said, you know what, it's just too long. You got to cut that. There were a couple of other things, but that was it. Usually you get notes from a studio that are pages long, and that never happened. I mean, they basically, for all intents and purposes, accepted the film as, we presented it to them. And you wish you could go back and most of those people are gone, or certainly they're not people that are, in our databases, because, they were not friends in the ultimate situation and screwed us pretty badly, actually. It'd be nice to have a conversation with them and say, well, did you guys ever think about this, and how did this ever get through, and how did this ever happen? But I think that I personally, I have to contribute some of the success of Night of the Living Dead to the fact that somebody wasn't paying attention. They just let those things get by, and those were the things that people picked up on. Those were the things that people liked. Those were the things that made Night of the Living Dead different from other films. Aside from the fact that it's a really good story, and and you don't find a lot of really good stories in horror films. So yeah, I think it was a really good film for its category and of its time. But then I think there was this extra little plus of just somehow getting in under the radar, and things were allowed to happen that just typically would have been red flagged by, Lord only knows, anybody within a studio system, not necessarily executives, but they have specifically people who just watch films for those things, and somehow we made it through that, through that scrutiny without. Yeah,
let me jump in here. And as I said, I saw it in West Atlanta in Georgia, and it's hard for young people right now to understand that I had gone into a Macy's in Georgia, and a woman of color, I had walked up to her, and she worked there, and I asked her for some help. Now, I'm from New Jersey, and I'm Irish, and, I'm not a bigot, right. We're right off the boat, and you work hard, and nobody's better than the other, and you're in the melting pot, and your parents walked 50 feet off of Ellis Island and said, sure, it's raining, this is just like Ireland, we'll stay here. So we didn't have that bigotry type thing going on so much, but so I thought nothing of walking up to this very lovely woman and asking for her help. And she looked at me, and she stiffened up like I had shot her and says, honey, don't be talking to me. You'll get me in trouble. And right. I backed off, and I'm thinking, okay. And this man walks up and says to me, is this lady bothering you, miss? And I'm like, no. I approached her. I asked her for help. And he says, oh, okay. And he dismissed her. Go back to your work, And
right.
People now don't understand how it was back then, and how this character Ben, he drives up in the what do you call it, the jalopy. He smacks a blonde woman in a dress. Then he beats the hell out of a white guy who's got a kid down in the basement. I mean, this man is literally saving all the white people. He's the only one who appears to be able to count over 15, except for the one wife there. It was a total departure from the way, Sidney Poitier, he always acted in movies where people of color were better shown, and their intelligence and all of that. But that wasn't the norm. The norm,
no.
you know.
I mean, you named Sidney Poitier. Who else was there? You know, I mean, there were very few others that you know, got to have a starring role. Let's say, you know. Long before Denzel Washington or Wesley Snipes or, you know, any of those people. So yeah, it was way trend-setting
really,
for that time.
It was,
and the point is, it was an accident. You know, well, it wasn't an accident, but Ben was not supposed to be played by Dwayne Jones. Rudy Ritchie, who was another member of our little clique of friends at the Leighton Image, Rudy Ritchie was supposed to play Ben, and a very good friend of George's said, "Look, there's this. You've got to see this guy. He's from Duquesne, PA, which is a local sort of suburb of Pittsburgh. He's teaching. He teaches actually in New York." You know, but he's home, and you know, so there's an opportunity for you to meet with him, and you should just let him read for the part, and just nothing ventured, nothing lost. And so George did that as a courtesy to his friend, and next thing you know, it's like he just hands down clearly was Ben. You know, he was you know, a much better actor. And, you know, and so people think that the part was written for a black man. It wasn't. You know, it was written really for a white man. And then you know, that's kind of like, there's so many things that have been read into this film over the years by, you know, people who have analyzed it and stop frame it and back up and do all this stuff. And, you know, there's so much stuff that was never really intended. But what I have to say is that you know, we were very much a product of our environment at that time. You know, and again, as I said, the key thing of it all was the Vietnam War was going on. You know, and the country was not in an easy place, you know, and well, I might add that when my brother and George got the first print, it's called an answer print, that suitable answer print, meaning that all the timing was right and the scenes were balanced, scene to scene, and so on and so forth, and they decide they throw the print in the trunk of the car and drive to New York City, and they're going to start shopping it around. They have no idea where they're going when they get there, but figured, hey, there's phone books, or, you know, there's also back in the day when we had phone booths, so you could literally go and look at, you know, and they go to film distribution. Well, on that drive up there, on their way to New York, was when Martin Luther King was assassinated.
Right.
And so all of a sudden, it's like they're looking at one another, hearing these news reports with this film with a starring African American in it, and they're just saying we're doomed. I mean, this is just, it's never going to fly. And once again, somehow it did, and somehow it made it through, and somehow it didn't just get red flagged. And you know, I mean, there's. Yeah, it was a little bit different in that time, but there were still tons of films being made that never got air, you know, never saw the light of day, because that's just the way the studios are, and you know. So anyway, yeah, there's obviously a lot of stars lined up to allow Night of the Living Dead to even be seen, let alone become, you know, a cult classic.
Yeah.
So, you know, I mean, again, I have to say that I really do believe that the basis of it was that it was a good, intriguing, well-written, well-crafted film. Yeah, it had its bumps and its grinds and its awkwardness, but, you know, somehow all of that stuff, I think, played into it's reality. I think that kind of the clumsiness in some of the acting roles and the, you know, some of the you know, black and white and lack of, you know, just sheer production dollars to do anything more. It was almost, and this has been said before too, but it was almost a documentary. You know, it had a very verite feeling about it, which just really lended very well, I think, to its scariness, because and, you know, people refer to those characters as, you know, wow, that could be my aunt or uncle or brother, because they literally were our aunts and uncles and brothers, you know, that we could you know, coerce into coming to be in our movie, because we didn't have money to pay them.
Well, one of my favorites is the sheriff. When they're saying, well, how do you kill him? He says, oh, they're all messed up. You just hit him in the head. He's so natural.
Beat him and burn him.
Yeah, you know, he's so natural that he lulls you into a false sense of, he's just, you know, this is real. This is like watching the news, you know, because he's just so a matter of fact.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in the film. You know, a lot of those. Again, as I said, it's you know, it's Blair Witch, you know, way before its time, and you know, that different film, of course, but that same unanticipated scariness, and then throw in on top of it the fact that, you know, people were literally eating people. You know, that never happened in a film before. You know, and all of a sudden you just cut to a scene where someone is gnawing on an arm. You know, and it's clearly an arm, and you know, it just, you know, what can I say? It did a lot of things right. You know, without being, you know, and thank heavens it was made in the time that it was made. I think that, you know, I talk to a lot of young filmmakers, and it's like, what do you say to them? It's just, you know, I feel really bad, because they have so much technology at their disposal that they forget about the story. You know, they forget about a thread line. They forget about compassion for the people in the films. You know, they forget about character development. They forget about all that stuff. Like them, love them, hate them, whatever, the characters got developed in Night of the Living Dead. You knew who they were. You had a sense of place with them, even if it's a quarreling couple. You know them. You know, that's real life. People quarrel. You know, and it's, you know, I've always said this, and I've worked in advertising for a long time, but, you know, the story always has to drive the technique. The technique can't drive the story, and I really feel that way about more modern horror films. You know, it's just, how big can we make? How far can the blood squirt? You know, how can we make this head being ripped off, you know, look, you know, even more realistic? And, you know, the thing of it is we all know that's fake. You know, real horror to me is screw with my mind, you know, make my mind. One of my favorite films of all times was Rosemary's Baby. You know, and that film just took me and twisted me, and, you know, 1 minute she's crazy, 1 minute, no, they're crazy, you know, and it just messed with your mind the whole time. You know, there was no blood. There was not one drop of blood in the whole movie. Yeah. And it did its job, but now it's gratuitous violence and you know, and bigger and better effects. And so I'm really happy in a way that Night of the Living Dead was made in a time when those effects were not accessible. You know, there was no way. I mean, it was like huge to us to think that we could actually get footage that we shot matted into a TV screen, you know, which was, of course, all the news footage. You know, that was huge, you know. So, and, you know, I mean, that's juvenile in this day and age, you know. And all the gunshots and all that sort of stuff were, they felt real because they were not over exaggerated and they weren't theatrical, you know, and it all, it's quirkiness, it's bumps and grinds, it's, you know, it's naivete, I think, just suited the plot so very well. You know?
Well, I think one of the things, and I do have a story from the camper this summer about the Night of the Living Dead. One of the things with the movie that switched it all up is before that, zombies were made by magic and they were slaves. They were always somehow being exploited, and so yeah, they were scary, but you kind of felt sorry for them too. You know, but then in this movie, they were hungry. Yeah, they were just walking around killing anybody alive. It was like, hey, a hot meal being delivered, here comes a car, you know, and that was a total departure from the old Bela Lugosi charming them and bringing them back, and where the wife is a zombie so the husband can control her, or the old one where the black manservant is he thinks he's turned into a zombie. Move over, boys, I'm part of the team now, you know, and they were always kind of funny, and even though, but this was different. It was something that you actually sat there and asked yourself, do you think the government's capable of doing something this stupid? You know, really, you know, we were wondering,
could this happen? You know, exactly. Could this happen?
We're going to go to break, but I wanted to share a story. This summer, the Neverbug, my granddaughter, turned 16, and I had all the teenagers at the camper most of the summer. And I said, well, let's watch, you know, Night of the Living Dead, the original one, of course. And they were watching it, and it's gratifying to see that at the end of it, these 5 kids who are teenagers, 2 of them were 18, and you know, they're all sitting watching this, and at the end, when Ben gets shot, the one looked at me and says, well, that's just messed up. You know, it's like you're rooting for this guy through the whole picture. And then suddenly, boom, one shot. And the guy that does it, you can't be mad at him because he's looking and going, don't worry, I got this. You know, he thinks that because he never said anything. He never yelled and say, hey, help me. You know, he's just looking and boom, there's the shot.
It's the irony of the fact that you know, yes, the posse comes in and they're just, you know, it's another human moment. It's what's likely to happen. You know, people don't ask for driver's licenses in situations like that. You know, you do what you're out there to do. You know, you eradicate the ghouls. So
It was just so cool because I watched them, and as they're watching them, they're sitting there, and you could see the suspense building, and it's, you know, and then boom, and the one kid looked at me and said, that's just messed up, and they were all pulled right into it. So as far as I'm concerned, the story was excellent, and the film did exactly what it was supposed to do. And I thought it was wonderful. We're going to go to break, and we're going to come back and talk about Evans City Cemetery and how this plays into the entire Night of the Living Dead. And you have a grassroots group trying to restore one of the buildings there, and we're going to talk about it, why. We're going to go to break, and I'm not quite sure what song we're playing because we're a little bit confused now. I'm confused. They aren't, but I'm always confused. But that's the way it is for me. We'll be right back. This is GameCon Radio, and our guest, Gary Streiner, who was part of the crew and the production crew of the original 1968 Night of the Living Dead, which is now, as far as I'm concerned, history. We'll be right back.
Just a reminder, guys, all our talk show hosts here at GameCon Radio volunteer their time, but you can always show your appreciation. Click on the tip jar and give them a little love. I'm sure maybe your predictions will come out a little bit better. And that's how we roll here at GameCon Radio. We rock your game and your paranormal.
Questions.
Who are we?
Where do we come from?
Are we alone in the universe?
Is there life after death?
Where can I take a class and really learn about demonology? Now, get the answers. For a decade, the American Institute of Metaphysics has offered the ultimate in courses designed to serve as the foundation in your search for life's questions. The courses cover a variety of subject areas and consist of wide-ranging alternative sciences, theories, and philosophies. Each course comes complete with textbooks, work materials, and instructions. The courses allow you the freedom to pursue your own areas of interest according to your schedule. Whether it's UFOs, life after death, demonology, cryptozoology, and more, you've got questions. We've got answers. Visit www.instituteofmetaphysics.com or call 877-623-3241 and start your search now.
Welcome back to Mo Banshee's Lair, Visionary Talk Radio on GameConRadio.com. We rock your world. Tonight, our guest is R Streiner, and we are having just a wonderful talk about the 1968 cult classic, Night of the Living Dead, and Gary was in the thick of it, and so was his brother. His brother was Johnny, and it's kind of screwed up that at the end the sister is screaming, "Johnny, help me," and Johnny's going to eat her. But, you know, that's the way things go. And we have a question for you, Gary, from Captain Celluloid asking, did any of you have any idea that this movie was going to be what it turned out to be?
No, we really, truly, honestly didn't. You know, but that didn't mean that we didn't try to make it the best we possibly could. I mean, we were, you know, a bunch of poor boys from Pittsburgh. You know, we didn't have, you know, grandiose backgrounds, and we didn't have major connections and all that stuff. And so, you know, we knew that if we got a shot at doing this, you know, we just had to work beyond any imaginable confines and constrictions of budget or anything else to make a film that was at least very scary and very believable. And so that's all we cared about. You know, that was our mission, was to never say no, never say we can't do that, never say, you know, we figured out ways to do it against, you know, pretty insurmountable odds. I mean, the production budget for Night of the Living Dead was $35,000, which, you know, I mean, people make home movies for $35,000 now.
Yeah.
You know, and so yeah, the budgetary constrictions were, but we had a lot of pluses going for us. As I said, we were an active production company. The group worked together for years. You know, making, as I said, documentaries and commercials and industrial films and things like that. So, you know, but nonetheless, I mean, this was our first, and certainly George's first crack at a feature film of having to, you know, carry dialogue and having to do all that stuff. So it was, you know, it was very adventurous for us to do that. And, you know, I do have to, you know, pat ourselves on the back and give George huge amounts of credit for, you know, having the wherewithal to keep this thing together, you know, and to, you know, to keep a continuity and a consistency and a, you know, I guess again, a believability. Again, as I said in the first segment, I think its rawness, really worked in its favor, where it could have worked against us. For instance, we got really lucky when we needed to get lucky, and it just created this tone that was was unique. People had never seen it before, So
okay, I have another question. I've got two more coming up. Were any careers besides George's jump-started into fame?
George is probably the most predominant one. Obviously because of the success of probably 5 films after that. But not really, everybody went on. I kind of departed and got into advertising, which, I have to say, my association with Night of the Living Dead certainly got me opportunities that I probably wouldn't have gotten any other way. So, I guess you could say that I was a success story to all that. My brother and John Russo and everybody they stayed in that career, but, again, they were in Pittsburgh, which was certainly not the production capital of the world, and,
right.
and that was their hometown, so I think that they had that going against them a little bit, but, no, I don't think certainly no one broke out like George. George was he was the clear leader in for future success.
They call him Romero's Dead Films: Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Land of the Dead, Diary of the Dead, Survival of the Dead. We really need to get George some therapy. And he's probably going to say, no, I don't think so.
And very interesting, each one of them is different, they're not just carbon copies of one another, George has made each one of them, like them or not, he's made them all unique, which I think is a tribute to his, his ability.
Yeah, and the remakes of the original, I'm sorry, they don't stand up against it. I don't know whether it's... I like you said, there is so much definitive blood, gore, that kind of thing, that when does it become just an out-and-out slasher movie as opposed to a horror or a scary movie? And for me, I'm kind of like Stephen King. Stephen King was asked, what really scares you? And he said, the death of one of my children. That, to me, that is horror. That and God, I'm not trying to play off of this, but if you've been watching the news, a 12-year-old went missing Saturday. Well, they found her today dead in New Jersey.
Oh, no.
To me, that's horror. That is a horror.
Yeah.
That is just absolutely the end of the world. And so to me, that's scary stuff to deal with that on an everyday basis. The other question was about it's public domain now, and why haven't things? I guess the copyright's been renewed for it.
No. Has been a lifelong mission of both my brother and John Russo, who are two of the trustees of Image 10 Corporation, to try to get it restored. And that's just they've had legislators, they've had amazing things, and it's just one of those things that once it's deemed public domain, it's virtually impossible to get it to get that reverse. And I was getting some.
I heard it too. Yeah, I heard it too, but that's okay.
That's okay. Yeah. So anyway, and that was a technicality of the film when they took it to New York for its round of screenings. It was a film called The Flesh Eaters. When Walter Reed decided that they were interested in picking the film up, they said, we got a slight problem with the Flesh Eaters. There's another film that has Flesh Eaters in it. We really think we should change the name of the film. Mm-hmm. And so it went to Night of Anubis, which of course that was George's idea, and nobody knew what the hell that meant. So that got squelched pretty early on. Yeah. And it was actually Walter Reed that said, let's call it, how about Night of the Living Dead? And everybody said, well, that's pretty cool. Yeah, let's go with that, Night of the Living Dead. Well, up to that point, we had handled all the post-production on the film completely. I mean, we did all the lab work. That was all done in Pittsburgh. And when they decided to take it over, they just said, okay, well, send us the few elements that we need, and we have those resources and those labs and so on and so forth, and we'll just change the title here. Mm-hmm. Well, when they did that, they left the Circle C off of the print. And that was enough to, have somebody challenge the copyright and actually win. And it's been that way since the very beginning, really. I mean, it took a little while for somebody to figure out that was missing. And since then, the copyright laws have changed. I mean, the crazy thing about it is everybody knows who made the film. There's no question about that. There's never any, everyone knows who made Night of the Living Dead, and why that, that wouldn't allow to be, reinstated, the copyright reinstated, or actually there was never a copyright technically. Right. So there wasn't to be reinstated, but to allow a copyright on something. And I mean, it goes on and on and on and on. And believe me, as I said, my brother and John Russo have spent a lifetime of trying to get that taken care of, and it just isn't going to happen.
Yeah, it isn't going to happen. And at this time, it's you're going to waste your life just fighting, banging your head against the wall.
You got to move on, and
right.
And then unfortunately, it all happened in an era when you didn't have Facebook and you didn't have, the resources to actually get your point of view out to the fans. Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden, it's really weird. It's starting to come around to like, wow, I didn't even understand. I was buying all those bootleg copies of it, and you weren't getting anything for that,
Right.
So somebody literally had posted on Facebook a picture of all of their versions of Night of the Living Dead, and I can't remember what it was, but there were probably 12 of them there, and I just said, yeah, the sad thing about it is, is that somebody made money off of every single one of those versions, and we didn't see a penny of it,
Right.
And it's a really unfortunate thing, but you've got to move on. You just can't, you can't linger in that world. But there's a bitterness about it. There's no question. There's, it's just like, but it also is as much of a social statement as the film itself was, is that people that don't care. There are people out there who are just happy to leap on to something they have absolutely no claim whatsoever to, and benefit from it financially. I'm just not cut from that cloth. I couldn't do that to save my life. I mean, I would at least want to include the original makers in a percentage of what it was anyway, something,
Yeah.
And they couldn't care less. I mean, it just, and that's kind of, I don't know, it just leaves a bad taste in your mouth, because when it happens, it's not graciously happening under any circumstance. So
yeah, well, what's the difference between a controlled or hostile takeover and enterprise, right? You know, it's all in the way they look at, and it's been going on since Morgan and all of them. You're part of the group that's trying to save the chapel in Evans City Cemetery, so please tell everybody why.
Well, somebody asked me the question, do you think you have more recognition for being one of the original investors and the sound man on Night of the Living Dead, or for your efforts to save the chapel? And I have to say, hands down, it's saving the chapel. You know, it's something that I knew about it. I actually have a farm, farm property in Evans City, just right outside of the city limits, and I had retired, took an early retirement, and moved back to my property there. And it was somebody said to me, "Hey, if this is going to be the 40th anniversary of Night of the Living Dead, Evans City should do something. There should be some form of celebration for the 40th anniversary." And so, I said, "Yeah, we should." And now the question was, would I help them organize something? And I said, sure. And then, of course, they were waiting for me to do the organization. They didn't want me to help. They wanted me to organize it. And I didn't act on it right away. And then I get another call about a month later saying, hey, wait, time's a wasting. If we're going to do something, we really have to do it. So in the second time around, it really dawned on me that, yes, it was important to do something, because there was no... In all this time, there was never any sort of official celebration of, Night of the Living Dead's anniversary, and so here I am. I live in the town. I was a key player in the movie, and it was like, okay, I guess I have no choice but to do this, and then I started to get into it, and then I started really, really enjoying it, because this was my time. All the rest of the guys and gals, like Kyra and Marilyn Eastman and Carl Hardman and Bill Heinzman and John Russo and George McMahon and my brother, they had been doing conventions for years. So, they were doing conventions before, they would just go out and sign autographs for people, for free. Right. And then, of course, that whole world changed, and the cost of actually doing that went up, and so on and so forth. So, they went through a whole realm of, this whole different price structure stuff, which I missed that completely, because I went off and did my own thing. And then coming back to it, it's like I got to reconnect, and, somebody said to me, when did you, it was a different version of that question that was asked me earlier. They said, when did you know that Night of the Living Dead was a cult classic? And I said, to be very honest with you, I didn't know the degree of it being a cult classic until 2008, when I came back to Evans City, and it was the 40th anniversary, and I started getting back involved with the fans. And that was actually before Facebook. So, I had very crude, I had like an email mailing list of like 35 people, and, and that's how I was communicating to the fan base. And then I did start going to conventions and, started to play more of a part in that role in that whole world. And that's when I started having that connection with the fans again. That's when I realized, when I would have people come up to my table and just say, dude, you changed my life, and I, it's just like you look at them like, oh, all right, well, come on, explain that a little bit. And then they do, and I was at one of my first conventions was one in Texas called Texas Nightmare Weekend, and it's a huge, big convention, and John Carpenter was one of the guests there, and George Romero was one of the guests. And, these are big conventions, and somebody just said, they came to my table and they said, without you, none of this would be here. And it was like, well, somehow it would have been there. It would have found its way. But you know what? Truth of the matter is, we are the reason that this is all here. We set a precedent in horror filmmaking, and whether we like it, dislike it, knew about it, whatever, we were that pivotal point. And so anyway, that was a real thrill to me to come back after all that time away from it and actually start reconnecting with the fans. Mm-hmm. And then, I went through 2008, 2009, 2010, I took a sabbatical and I didn't do the Living Dead Festival. And the Living Dead Festival was, in 2009 we had 17 cast and crew members of Night of the Living Dead, which was the largest gathering of cast and crew members in the history since the film was made. And they were all signing autographs and all doing their thing in a little park in Evans City called Edco Park. And the cemetery was kind of always very standoffish about the involvement. It's a very small town, Evans City, and it's a very provincial town in many ways. And they were quite frankly terrified of the horror realm and the horror fans. They didn't know. I mean, I think in a lot of ways they conceived horror fans as being Hell's Angels of the 60s. Mm-hmm. They really thought that they were going to come in and rape and pillage the town.
Yeah.
And and they were the chairman of the Cemetery Association was most terrified about that. He really thought that these hooligans were going to come into Evans City and they were going to tear the cemetery apart.
Right.
And I mean, that just couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, it's revered. It's like they pay homage to it. I wish I had a tape of the demeanor of people when they're in the cemetery, and they can be tattooed and pierced and totally decked out in leather, and they're just humble and respectful, and I can't say enough about the fans. So that perception was very prominent within the community, and even with town council. When I started it, I wanted to call it the Evans City Living Dead Festival. And they I could have done it, but I did ask for permission, and they said no. We'd just assume you didn't. They didn't want to be connected to it. And I'm thinking, I came out of marketing and advertising, right?
Right.
And I'm just scratching my head trying to think, oh, this is going to be a long, hard road.
Yeah.
This is not going to happen quickly.
That there's certain catchwords that are going to get everybody's attention. And if you're looking for that, that's what you want to use. And then somebody says, well, please don't do that because we don't want to seem like, we don't want to be too popular.
We don't want to be the first ones out there, really, that condone this. So, so anyway, this is 2008, right? 2009, 2010, we get to 2011. I knew in 2008 that there's a building on the property that is predominantly in the background when Johnny and Barbara are first pulling up in the cemetery, and I'm there. I go up to the cemetery all the time, and I'm seeing this building is like literally falling apart, and I caught wind of the fact. I've been hearing about it. They said no. They got an estimate. It was going to cost them $50,000 to fix it. They said they didn't want to fix it. There was no reason to fix it, and then the chapel was, because for some reason it was built as a chapel, to have memorial services, but somehow it never worked. To all the records that we can find, there was only one service in it ever. And it just didn't get used from it. There's all sorts of theories. It's on a weird, it's kind of inconvenient part of the cemetery, on a hilly part of the cemetery. There's not really great parking around it, and it just never got used. So when it started being used for, as a matter of fact, I called George and asked him if he would do me a favor, and just when I first started this whole thing out, the fundraiser out, would he just write a statement for me? Would he just write something that explained, his involvement with the cemetery in Evans City and so on and so forth, and because I said I'm trying to raise the money to fix this chapel, and he goes, chapel. Chapel. Did we shoot in a chapel? He didn't even, because everybody really referred to it or knew it as the tool shed or the caretaker's, shed.
Right.
And so, but when I started the fundraiser, it was like, okay, again, coming from marketing, okay, do I call it Fix the Tool Shed or Fix the Chapel? I went with Fix the Chapel. I think it was a wise decision. So, in a weird sort of way, the whole cause found me more than I found it, because literally there were rumblings in this little town of Evans City that the first person that happened to have a backhoe on a trailer that was available for a day, it was going down. I mean, it was that close. It was just because, number one, they did use it to store all their lawn tractors and so forth, and all their maintenance equipment for the cemetery. And then the cutting blades got too wide to even get it in the door, so they had to build another metal building. And so now it had no purpose, at least for many years. It was a caretaker's shed, and it at least had a purpose. All of a sudden, it didn't even have a purpose anymore to them, and it was just a liability, and they knew they didn't have the money to fix it. And truly, I mean, this is a small cemetery in a very rural town, so it's not a, we all know cemeteries that just, frankly, the only reason they get any upkeep at all is because, the families of the people in it take on the mission of cutting it, and, so the Evans City Cemetery is only maybe one step ahead, because on the back part of the property they have a cell phone tower. And literally the cell phone tower is what's keeping the cemetery alive and maintained and neat and clean and all that sort of stuff. So, it became this crossroads, and then all of a sudden somebody sent me an email, and they just said, I had the year before started the Facebook page and the group, and somebody said, there's people over there asking a lot of questions, and I had literally not even been there. I forgot that I even had it, right? And I go over, and there's all of a sudden, are you going to have a festival this year, and what's going on this year? And I literally, the way the whole, literally within, it felt like 45 minutes, I got a reply.
Oh, there you are. Okay, we're back.
Oh, how long have I... I'm just telling a rather involved story here.
Just go back about a minute or so, because it kind of just faded out on us. Are you on a cell phone? Away. Are you on a cell phone?
Yeah, but I haven't even moved, so it could be that, I guess.
It could just be the pull on the, we might have a lot of listeners, so... Right. Yeah, okay.
So anyway, long and short of it is that I had a lot of knowledge about the chapel, and most of that knowledge was not positive. It was no longer serving a purpose to the cemetery, and so they decided that they were going to tear it down. So I went back to the point that I had this Facebook group, but I hadn't even been there because I wasn't going to have a festival that year, and I didn't pay any attention to it. And somebody emailed me and said, well, you should at least go over and check. There's a lot of people over there that are asking questions. So I go to the Facebook page, and sure enough, people are asking. And so as an explanation, I said, no, I'm not going to have a festival this year. Instead, I'm going to, dedicate my time to trying to save the chapel.
Mm-hmm.
And within like 45 minutes, somebody says, well, there's a meeting on September 22nd, and if you want to get in that meeting, just tell me because my mother-in-law is a board member. It's like, okay. So now all of a sudden, what started out to be almost an excuse for why I wasn't going to, do the festival that year became, all right, well, now you've opened your mouth. Now you've got to at least go to this meeting and find out what's going on. And so I did, and they did, in fact, tell me that it was going to be torn down. And I said, look, I'd like the opportunity to try to raise the money through fans. And they said, okay, you have a year. And so that was, 2011. September 27th, and by September 27th of 2011, we had raised enough money to fix the chapel. So it is actually not even speculation anymore. The chapel will be saved. We may still need to raise a few $1,000s here or there along the way, but we have enough money in the bank to save it.
Cool. Are you looking for volunteers to help you with it, or are you guys going to have to hire people?
Unfortunately, early on, I pretty much made the decision because there were people from everywhere, volunteering, and what became very few of them, obviously, were from Evans City. They're from all parts of the country, and it just came to the point of trying to organize that, trying to, how do you hold volunteers accountable for things? This is construction. This is not. I just said this is why we're raising the money. We're raising this money to have professionals fix it. So I have found a contractor. There's actually work has already started on it. There's, not to get too technical about it, there's a porch in front, and there were 4 pillars holding that porch roof up, and the 3 of those pillars failed and were not. They were already gone. They had already fallen down in 1967 when we shot the film. So the whole roof was in not a great state, but one where it just needed to be jacked back up again and put into position where it's supposed to be. And so we've done that, and it's kind of basically after 40 years or 45 years nearly of being unsettled, it is now settled, and it's back into the position it's supposed to be. So it takes a little while for the building literally to correct itself. So the contractor just wanted to give it as much time as he could, and we're just unfortunately when the whole thing started, we're kind of running out of weather. So I don't think a whole lot is going to physically happen to it this fall/winter, but I think we'll get a really good jump on it early next spring as soon as we can, and it's going to be restored to its original glory to the best of our ability. So,
your site that you have for it is www.fixthechapel.com, and you're still taking donations toward it, right?
We are temporarily not, but
okay.
I'm sorry, I'm just to qualify that we're temporarily having PayPal difficulties. As people know, PayPal can be difficult. We certainly will take donations in the form of checks, but we can't process PayPal at the moment, and hopefully that will be corrected before too long. And you know, we're pretty much, it's kind of like the fundraising aspect of it is now winding down, or is pretty much wound down. I don't want to like order more T-shirts, for instance, because I don't want to sit on an inventory of T-shirts. You know, so we've come close enough to our goal that, you know, I want to just, you know, we're kind of capping that off. But of course, we would always take donations. Right now, we're probably somewhere around $5,000 short of our goal to get 50,000. But you know, there's all sorts of other things that we're going to do. We're going to build a whole walkway out in front of the chapel. That's going to be we're going to sell memorial bricks. You know, for that. So that's going to be huge. I mean, there are tons and tons of people that want to buy those memorial bricks. So that's going to net us a bunch of money. And you know, I'm really kind of happy to say that we're in a pretty nice place. You know, yeah. I mean, yeah, we do have some more money to raise, but I think we have the means of raising that, and it's certainly not out of sight. And bigger than anything, the chapel saves. What I think is interesting is, and interesting to people, that there'll always be the opportunity. There will, as long as I exist, there will be money that's needed for the cemetery. You know,
right.
If the chapel is done, there's tons of other things that need to happen in the cemetery.
Right.
So this is going to be an ongoing thing. It's not going to you know, be over in a year. It's going to go on for the rest of my life. And the other thing is that the dynamic is going to change a little bit. More than our website, which is obviously important, but it is our Facebook group, which is the Living Dead Festival / Save the Chapel. If you search for any of those things, you'll come to us. We've had a really, really wonderful. It's just been extraordinarily. I don't know even what the right adjectives are to. It's just that the group is unbelievable. It's just the most intense group of like-minded people that are all ridiculously polite. They have no hidden agendas. They don't argue. They don't bicker. They're supportive. We have a thing going on right now. It's called Artist of the Week. It's been going on for, I think, 11 weeks, and there's another, I think we have 23, 24 people signed up. And these are just artists that are in the group of all forms, and they get a week to just show their wares. And it is, I mean, it's the coolest horror site, I think, on Facebook. I'm tooting my own horn here, but it's, I highly recommend or suggest that anybody go to that. And that's kind of also our day-to-day point. I don't know if you've ever run a website. They're really difficult. They're really hard to, you know, keep up and keep maintained, where, you know, Facebook, you just get on and you write something, you know, and there it is. It's up and ready to go, and it's sort of like immediate information. So it's become, and that was always, you know, that's always what I wanted from the very beginning in a website, was the ability to communicate with. That's the only reason I needed. Well, I needed a website for two things. I needed it for the store, you know, so I could sell things, so that in fact we could raise the money, and I needed a place to communicate with people. And the problem is that I could never kind of come up with the software, because I don't have a budget. You know, I couldn't come up with the software to have a really good forum. So it was like, and then all of a sudden Facebook came to be, and it is absolutely, unquestionably, the perfect media for what we're trying to do here, and really and beyond. So we have, you know, we started out a little over a year ago with 220 members, and we now have very close to 3,000 members. So it's like, you we got people's attention, and not everybody likes it. It's a very folksy kind of place. I think a lot of people come there and think it's just going to be, riddled with Night of the Living Dead information, and I think they're disappointed because that's not what it is. It's far more about the chapel, but it's far more about the community. It's about these wonderful, amazing people. To me, it's the perfect microcosm of what our society should be. And the pitfall is that when you try to expand it is when it starts to fall apart. But right now, I cannot tell you the positive energy. I cannot tell you how many friendships have been made, how many lifelong friendships have been made, through this vehicle, all because they're there for the same reason. They're there because of their love of horror, and most specifically Night of the Living Dead and the chapel. Right. And I mean, it's funny because in the early days, there'd be skeptics who'd come on into the group and say, this is bullshit. There's far more important things to save than this chapel. Right. What's so important about this chapel? And like the hair would raise up on the back of my neck, and my first, inclination was to delete their post. And early on, I just said, no, let it go. And you'd let it go, and you would watch, you just watch all the members not counterattack, but actually, very politely, wonderfully articulate why the chapel is important to them. Right. And it's just, in the modern world that we live in, this is just like, wow.
Let me break in here for a second. I am a huge proponent of cemeteries. I love cemeteries. They are our history. I have a friend, Al Savalang, who was on a couple of weeks ago, or maybe even last week, I think. And his nickname is the Cemetery Man, and he's the trustee for Rose Hill Cemetery in Matawan, New Jersey. And it's one of the best examples of a garden-style cemetery. And what people don't realize is back in the day when horses were peeing and crapping all over the streets, you couldn't go for a Sunday walk in town. So they made these cemeteries as places where on a Sunday afternoon you take the children, and you paid your respects, but you also got out of the city where all the stench was from the animals doing their thing, and still you looked and said, oh, there's this family, and there's the Burlews, and did you know Captain Burlew is the one who saw the shark during the 1916 shark attacks? These are history lessons that are still there, and we need to maintain them so that we have this record, which is seemingly falling by the wayside, and small towns depend on that. You're so you've articulated it better than anybody has, and I've tried, but I'm gonna steal your words for in the future, because that's exactly it. The people, people find lots of people just find cemeteries to be morose and death and doom and gloom, and if they ever spent any time in them, they would know it. The energy in a cemetery is amazing. They have a little war memorial section in the Evans City Cemetery, and they have benches there. And I've just gone up there and just purposely sat there beyond, I guess, a normal amount of time. And it's really, you just look over all these, headstones, and you go, these are the people that built this community. These are the people that their spirit doesn't go away because they've died. No. It lives on, and you just, it sounds a little crazy, but you do. And once you're in this environment and they realize that you're embracing the whole thing, I really do feel that they come out, much more. They're much more
this spirit is still here on Earth. It doesn't necessarily have to go off into some preconceived idea of hell or heaven. You know, I mean, it's right. This energy is right in these cemeteries, and they're wonderful and they're peaceful. The same thing, you know. We've gone beyond, you know, the horse crap on the streets and whatever, but it's still a place where you go and you know it's going to be quiet. And you know there's not going to be any, you know, horrific activity, and then, you know, and I love them. I absolutely agree. Now, I am partial to the Evans City Cemetery because obviously it has so much history with me, and I live in that town. But there are thousands of these cemeteries around the world. And you know, the sad thing about it is that I've said this 100 times before, too. You know, if I was trying to save a building in Joe Blow's cemetery and wherever, I would have about $800 by now. You know, the fact that this is Night of the Living Dead completely changes the chemistry of it. But that doesn't mean that these other cemeteries shouldn't get some attention too. You know, I mean, you're so absolutely right. And it doesn't take long. You know, it really doesn't take long to have them start to decay and fall apart, you know.
Let me jump in here. I was up at Sleepy Hollow in New York, and I was walking around with my daughter, and we ended up on the top of a grassy knoll, and, of course, we got to see some of the mausoleum roofs there, and we're looking over at the Hemsley, you know, the wicked, whatever her name was, Hemsley, that owned the Empire State Building, and they've got this black onyx mausoleum with tinted windows by Tiffany and all this, and here's this beautiful older mausoleum, and the ceiling, the roof is literally just falling from decay, and the thing is that the money, it's hard, you know, we kind of like to bury our dead and walk away. And so much history is being lost because the cemeteries simply don't have the funds to maintain them. And it is, because a lot of these have the old slate on the roof. And that means getting someone in there and fixing the rotting wood so it can support the slate that's going to have to be replaced on there and stuff. And it's heartbreaking because you think, well, Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, they shouldn't have to run fundraisers to keep things going there, but they do. And you know what? That's cool. As long as people are respectful, I don't care how you get the money to save them so our children can see them.
That's right. I mean, and one of the questions that I was asked by the Cemetery Association, they said, all right, so, you know, let's say you can go out among fans and you can raise the money and you can fix it up, then what? You know, and it was like, you know, I wasn't prepared for that question necessarily. But the first thing that leapt to my mind was, well, I guarantee you could fill the calendar with weddings and vow renewals, you know, and they just looked at me like I had two heads, and then I said, well, how much do people pay to rent a church and have a service? I said, I bet you could get $500 a service there.
Just to get married in that chapel.
Yeah, are you kidding? To get married in the Night of the Living Dead chapel or renew your vows? You know, I mean, really. And so it was like, it was shocking to them that they could actually, people would want to do that up there. And I go, no, of course you have to control it, and of course you have to, you know, it's like anything else. You have your restrictions and you have your guidelines, and, you know, it's like you figure it out. If in the beginning it's too much for them to be in zombie makeup, you don't allow it. Just, you know, it's going to be a straight up, if that's the point of it is you can control that. They will still do it. They won't walk away just because you put restrictions on them.
Right.
And they'll do it just because that's something that they can talk about for the rest of their lives.
Look at this couple in England that got married, and they were dressed as Klingons. It's in the news today, and my son was cracking up because one of the guys interviewing says, well, they did a kiss at the end. Well, what you wanted to do? Kick him in the balls like a true Klingon? Hey, we're married. Guess what? I mean, really. But look at the extent, and I'm sure this couple dropped mega monies to do this, and it's not hurting anybody if two people get dressed up like zombies and marry each other in that little chapel, and it will support the cemetery. It will support the history of the area, and it'll bring attention to it that your own children need to understand death is a natural part of life.
And not only that, it's not only the cemetery, it's the community in general, which desperately needs the tourism, And all of a sudden, if people start coming, then all of a sudden storefronts start getting filled. And people start catering to them, and it becomes an industry.
Right.
Yes, I am all for, I don't want to see it turned into a carnival act. Certainly not up at the cemetery. But tell me what the issue is of having a very tightly, neatly run little museum in the basement of it. Where people can come in and have a gift shop, buy a book, buy a this, buy a that, and it's run by the Evans City Historical Society.
That's it. Get them on board.
Yeah, the Historical Society is all over it. They would love to have that opportunity. But you know what? As I said, I realized from that early stage, I realized from almost day one into this in 2008 that it was going to be a long road. It was going to be baby steps. It was going to not be trying to force feed these people anything. It was going to be lead by example, show them what can be done, show them who these people are. My point is it's a public cemetery. These fans are coming there anyway.
Right.
I'm up there a lot. I live literally 2 miles away from the place, probably 1.5 miles away from the place. I'm up there a lot. And I would say that 90% of the time that I'm up there, there's a fan up there. And so all it is give them a little something. They would love to pay a $5 entrance fee to come into a museum, even if it's to see nothing else but all of the art and all of everything that's been created just for the fundraiser. It's their connection to something. They love this film so dearly. It's their connection to it. They'll pay for it. They're not asking for it to be for free.
Right.
And that's it. And what do? You do it, you control your hours, maybe in the summer it's open on weekends and on Wednesday,
Right.
And in the morning, and that's it. And it's closed, the doors are shut,
Yeah.
And I just said, look, if you have a real fear about it, you can make enough money off of this gift shop to hire a full-time guard.
Your restaurants are going to need to feed the bridal groups coming in for these weddings.
Exactly.
Your hotels are going to have to put them up overnight so they can get married in the morning. You're going to have all kinds of stuff going down, and every business there is going to thrive for it. And everybody who forgot their camera, forgot their film or their little card that goes in the camera, they're going to need to shop
have to run
at
down the store and buy it. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
It's a win-win for everybody, but it's especially a win for the cemetery itself. You can start fixing the old girl up and manicuring her and bring her back to what her original intent was, a place for people to remember their beloved.
Yeah. Well, you know what was really interesting that I went back to another. They only have their meetings quarterly, so I only have an opportunity to go to an association meeting 4 times a year. But I went back to another one, and in the meantime, they had talked amongst themselves, and they said, you know what, we had an idea. We would really like to promote this again as a place to have the memorial services. They said, the funny thing is, they said back, in the day that it sort of fell out of favor, you could get somebody that, if it was inclement weather, you could get somebody to put a tent up at the gravesite for $15. Mm-hmm. Now it's $300.
Right.
And they're saying they fortunately they came to that conclusion themselves. They said, I mean, we could rent it. We can let them use it for $100, and when that's 100 fewer, cleared $100. Right. I said, now you're thinking, and you know what that would do if I knew that I had anything to do with the repurposing of this building, which was in its repurposing was to bring it back to its original purpose. To me, there's nothing better. I would be so happy. I would be so happy to see the memorial services were happening in there again. Mm-hmm. And who knows? Look, every little bit helps, and so you do a wedding a month or 2 a month or 4 a month, whatever. I'm just saying. There you go. There's $2,000, friends. You can tell me you don't need that $2,000. Yeah. I think you do. And so anyway.
You're my hero because I am a huge advocate for cemeteries. I think it's deplorable the way we have just walked away from them and forgotten them because it is our past, it is our future. It's a capsule, a time capsule, and you're my hero for stepping up to the plate. It's not easy, especially when you start. You're all alone, but I'm
well.
Really
again, I have to say we have to include the fans of Night of the Living Dead into your list there because again, I many times I've said, you know what. I get credit for being the founder of this whole thing. That I just tell people, hey, I'm just the bus driver. You guys are the ones that are putting fuel in it, and yeah, any mission needs guidance and needs help. But without the fans, my efforts would be zero. What I mean? I couldn't go anywhere with it. So. It's but again, it's a wonderful symbiotic situation. Everybody wins. Nobody loses in this whole thing. Artists created art that we, that we auctioned off on eBay. We made, probably $4,000 worth of art that, money on art that people just donated. I mean, and they had such a, because they're artists. They don't have any money, but they have art, and it made them feel so good that they could participate in this and be part of this by just, donating a print, and so it's just connected so many dots, and it's been such a positive, wonderful thing. It's, I have nothing but. I really, truly do consider it one of the certainly, more worthy causes that I've been involved with in my whole life.
The more rewarding,
Yeah. So it does. It all works out.
I want to thank you for coming on. This was awesome.
My pleasure.
And please, if you ever have something you want to come on and talk about, your business, your anything more about the chapel, please let me know.
Yeah, well, maybe we can do a follow-up in the spring when we start doing some work on it. And,
there you go.
We can get you some pictures and video and all that sort of stuff that you might be able to use on certainly the YouTube outlet.
And where can they find it on Facebook?
It would be under the Living Dead. If they search the Living Dead Festival or Save the Chapel, either of those two things. And I think the actual technical address is the Living Dead Festival / Fix the Chapel or Save the Chapel.
Facebook.com/group/Save the Chapel I got
you
it up
found
here.
It.
Yep, I found it.
Cool.
And the other site is your regular site, www.fixthechapel.com, and this will all be in the description of your show so people can find you and contact you about it. I want to thank you again for coming on. This has been very interesting, and it's been so interesting we didn't run 2 commercials just because of it.
Wow. Holy moly, how are you going to pay for this thing?
Oh, yeah. I'm going to have to sell one of my young for it, but that's okay. That's okay. Thank you for being so patient with the beginning, because we did do something new tonight, and that was a little bit, it set us off a little bit, but that's okay. Again, thank you so much, and God bless you, and by all means in the spring, let me know how you're doing, and we'll bring you up for a follow-up, okay?
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a real pleasure.
Okay, thank you so much. Good night.
Good night.
Night-night. Our guest next week is going to be the end of Halloween. R.J. Jameson, Barnabas and Company, will be on, and she co-wrote a book, which is pretty basically an encyclopedia of everybody who has been in any of the Dark Shadows movies, books, and such, and all the episodes. And then I'm going to Ireland, and I won't be back until the 11th. And when I come back, we will be interviewing one of the trustees of Sleepy Hollow Cemetery in New York, and that's Washington Irving Sleepy Hollow, with Ichabod Crane and the Headless Horseman. So we'll be doing that on the 13th. And then we're going to have a person on for a Dracula show on the 20th. So we got a lot of stuff going on here, guys. I want to thank you all for being patient with us. God bless you all. We love you all, and good night.
Somewhere over the rainbow, birds fly. Birds fly over the rainbow, while
Thank you for visiting me at my lair. Banshee's Lair is broadcast live on Tuesday evenings at 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Mountain, 7 p.m. Pacific, and in the UK, 3 a.m. Wednesday mornings on www.gameconradio.com. You can listen to our recent recordings on Podomatic/Banshee. You can contact me at www.asylumsgate.com. Again, thank you for listening. God bless you and yours, and have a very cool day.